she was so badly beaten that she was unrecognizable. And I didn't want my mother to see her like that. It was just devastating.
Danielle Lynn Clause's lifeless body, naked and bruised beyond recognition, was found discarded on a quiet hillside in Ventura, California. In the chaos of the crime scene, vital evidence was overlooked. One small clue that went unnoticed for years. But when that one detail was finally uncovered, it blew the case wide open. The morning of July 16, 1991 began like any other in the beautiful seaside town of Ventura. But at 10:30 a.m., that beauty was spoiled by a horrifying discovery. A crew of local landscapers were going about their routine work on the hillside at the top of Tioga Drive near downtown Ventura. But what they stumbled upon was far from routine. In a flood control catch basin partly covered with shrubs and weeds, they found a partially clothed and brutally beaten body of a woman. Shocked by the sight before them, they immediately informed the authorities, and investigators from the Ventura Police Department promptly arrived at the scene. They began their investigation with a careful examination of the area, looking for any clues that could shed light on the circumstances of the tragedy. The wounds on her face and head told a story of a violent and brutal attack. It was clear that she had suffered immensely before her life was tragically cut short. With no ID on her, the investigators turned to fingerprint technology to identify her. They carefully collected her fingerprints and ran them through the national database. The process was slow and involved thorough checks against a vast array of records, but it was accurate. By evening, they finally had a name. The dead woman was 42-year-old Danielle Lynn Clause. She had been reported missing by her husband that morning. Danielle Lynn Clause was born on July 24, 1948 in Long Beach, California. From a young age, she displayed extraordinary artistic skills and a vivid imagination. She would give handmade cards to her family and friends during holidays and other special occasions. But her talents didn't end there. Danielle was a gifted poet, and her words often described the complexities of human nature and experiences. One poem, Sheltered Heart, co-written with her sister, painfully spoke about a broken and bleeding heart exposed to intentional cruelty. Tragically, this imagery later mirrored the circumstances of her own untimely death. Despite these creative achievements, Danielle faced significant personal challenges, including cocaine and heroin addiction. However, she showed remarkable determination and refused to let them define her. Her journey to recovery was not easy, but she kept going and successfully turned her life around. After getting better, she decided to use her own experience to help others who were struggling. She even went back to school and finished her A-levels in drug and alcohol studies from Vista Del Mar Adult School. She was determined to be a lifeline for people battling addiction, offering them the support and guidance she wished she had. But tragically, Danielle's story took a dark turn on the evening of July 15, 1991. Around 8 p.m., Danielle was seen talking with a man at the corner of Hemlock Street and Thompson Boulevard. This would be the last time anyone saw her alive. When Danielle didn't return home overnight, her worried husband knew something was terribly wrong. He immediately reported her missing on the morning of July 16th. But sadly, the call for help came too late. Local landscapers who were installing sprinklers and planting at the end of Tioga Avenue on the hill above Grant Park found Danielle's body at 10:30 a.m. that day. She was found face down in a sandy rainwater catch basin 50 yards from nearby houses. Near Danielle's body, investigators found a blood-stained rock, which was likely the weapon used in her murder. A small pool of blood was also found around her head. Investigators carefully searched the crime scene, collecting every piece of potential evidence, including rocks, cigarette butts, discarded trash, and anything else that seemed out of place or disturbed. All forensic evidence was carefully collected and preserved for further examination. Her body was then sent for an autopsy to understand the full extent of the crime. The results of the autopsy were troubling. It revealed that Danielle had been sexually assaulted, and her death was caused by multiple brutal blows to her head. The hillside where Danielle's body was found added another layer of complexity to the investigation. The area was known to be a popular gathering place for teenagers. They frequently came there after dark to hang out, drink, and socialize. It was typically a lively and noisy scene. This meant that the crime scene had likely been contaminated by others, making it difficult to separate crucial evidence related to the crime itself. However, it also meant that there were people nearby that night who might have seen or heard something that could help identify Danielle's killer. Several witnesses reported seeing a white pickup truck with pinstripes near the crime scene around the time of Danielle's disappearance. But identifying the truck's owner and connecting it to the crime proved challenging. Investigators tirelessly canvassed the area, knocking on doors and interviewing countless individuals. Danielle's case file grew to over 1,000 pages as investigators carefully documented every avenue explored and every lead followed. But despite their best efforts, they were unable to identify a suspect or gather enough concrete evidence to make an arrest. The crucial DNA evidence collected from the kit also couldn't provide a definitive answer at the time. The technology available in 1991 simply wasn't advanced enough to generate a usable suspect profile. As time passed, leads dried up, and the investigation gradually stalled. With no new information or breakthroughs, the case eventually went cold by 1992. Then, in 2021, Officer Tyler Buck, a new recruit in the Ventura PD's Major Crimes Unit, began analyzing Danielle Clause's case again.
Connected with our crime scene investigations team, and we combed through the evidence to discover that the murder weapon, which was a rock, as well as the victim's fingernail clippings, were still available and had never been tested.
In May 2021, the rock and Danielle's fingernail clippings were sent to Ventura County Crime Lab for testing. Investigators wanted to see if the DNA on those matched the DNA from the sexual assault kit. This would tell them if Danielle's killer and the were the same person or not. By September 2021, the investigators had their answer. The DNA from all three sources matched. This meant they were looking for one person who had committed both the murder and the sexual assault, but they still didn't know who he was. At that point, investigators knew they had to use genetic genealogy to solve this case. However, genealogy testing is quite expensive, and additional funding was needed to continue down this path. So, the Ventura PD connected with Season of Justice, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing funding for investigative agencies and families to help solve cold cases. They awarded them around $8,000 to help move the case forward. Once the funding was secured in June 2022, the police department contacted Identifinders International, a forensic genetic genealogy firm specializing in using DNA technology to help law enforcement agencies in solving cold cases. Identifinders then connected the investigators with senior forensic genealogist and cold case liaison Misty Gillis. She sent the DNA samples to Gene by Gene, a commercial genetic testing company based in Houston, Texas. By July 2022, Gene by Gene had built a comprehensive genetic profile of the suspect. Misty uploaded this profile to two special genealogy databases that law enforcement can use, GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. This would help identify potential relatives of the suspect and learn more about his family history. After the profile was uploaded, Ventura PD's genealogists began constructing the suspect's family tree. Through careful genealogical analysis, they identified a link to a living family member, the female first cousin of the suspect. This cousin, who lived in San Diego, had a keen interest in genealogy and had compiled a very detailed family tree of her own. The investigators traveled to San Diego to meet with her in person. During their meeting, she expressed strong interest in supporting the investigation. She provided a detailed breakdown of her entire family tree and even volunteered a DNA sample. Analysis of her sample confirmed that she was indeed a first cousin match to the suspect. This was a major breakthrough in the case. Revisiting her family tree, investigators discovered she had only 2 male first cousins. This significantly narrowed down the search for the suspect. The focus was now on 2 brothers, one of whom was alive and living in Virginia, while the other had passed away. At this point, the investigators found themselves at a standstill, uncertain of how to proceed. They did not have the necessary staffing and resources to send 2 investigators out of state to discreetly obtain a DNA sample. So, they once again decided to leverage forensic technology. This time, they turned to DNA phenotyping. This forensic technique uses genetic information to predict an individual's physical characteristics, including skin, hair, and eye color, along with facial features. They reached out to Parabon Nanolabs for their snapshot services, which ultimately broke the tie between the 2 brothers by helping to identify which one most likely contributed to the sample. The analysis revealed with a high degree of confidence that Danielle's killer had brown or green eyes and brown hair. This was consistent with the appearance of the deceased brother. The living brother had blonde hair and blue eyes. However, to rule him out conclusively and confirm the deceased brother as the murderer, they needed a DNA sample from the living brother. In January 2024, investigators contacted the Virginia State Police to see if they could help them, since the living brother lived in that state. They agreed, and 2 Ventura PD investigators flew there to meet the living brother. The brother was very cooperative. He provided valuable information about his brother's life and willingly provided his own DNA sample for analysis. Virginia State Police tested this sample and confirmed that the living brother was not the suspect. Furthermore, they established that he was a full sibling of the suspect. This result definitively confirmed that the DNA found at the crime scene belonged to the deceased brother. On May 7, 2024, the Ventura PD officially announced Larry Devin Welch as the man who assaulted and murdered Danielle Clause. Welch, who lived in Ventura County at the time of the murder, died in 1999. Born on 24 July 1949, Welch was 42 years old when he committed the crime. He owned a white Ford pickup Ranger at the time and had a P.O. box in Ventura the year of the murder. He was also seen by an eyewitness with Danielle that night and was observed by another witness circling the top of Tioga Drive later that evening. This information, combined with the DNA analysis and forensic genetic genealogy testing, provided investigators with conclusive evidence to definitively identify the suspect. The police did not find any known connection between Welch and Clause. So, the motive behind Welch's brutal act remains unknown. Danielle's sister, Marcy Fort, expressed deep gratitude for Ventura PD and everyone involved in solving her sister's cold case. She spoke about Danielle's life and the long wait for justice. Even though the suspect was dead, and Danielle's family never saw him face any punishment for his crime, finally identifying him brought a measure of closure after 33 long years. While the pain of their loss remains, they can finally move forward with some degree of peace. But the question remains, why did Larry Devin Welch commit this horrific crime? Was it random, or did he target Danielle for a reason? With Welch gone, these questions will never be answered. If you found this case compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into true crime. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.